economic devastation caused by the coronavirus pandemic. He has been taking on the NDC on government's debt accumulation record.
Those who mismanage the economy for us to come and fix it are the ones wishing Ghana ill. My message to them is this: there is no turning back. HIPIC is behind us. Economic mismanagement is behind us.
We have details of the budget presented to Parliament today as a minority insists the economy is broke.
Out of that 27 billion, over 10 billion of that amount would be used to service debt. It tells you that this country is broke.
This is Top Story with Evans Mensah.
And Top Story is always brought to you by Gasim Cement, the Nation Builder, and Belacqua Mineral Water. Now, the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, has today been making bold declarations about the rebounding of the Ghanaian economy following the devastation caused by the coronavirus pandemic. In a statement to Parliament, the Mr. Ofori-Atta asked to spend 24 billion cedis till March next year. In the last couple of days, the minority had attacked government's debt record, with former President John Mahama declaring that Ghana is back to being a heavily indebted poor country. Well, today the Finance Minister fought back and, in fact, announced there will be more borrowing from the international capital markets up to $5 billion. More on that shortly. But first, why is the Finance Minister so confident Ghana's economy will recover faster than anticipated?
The robustness of our macroeconomic fundamentals and the efficacy of government COVID mitigation measures have been borne out by recent indicators. According to the Bank of Ghana's survey in August 2020, consumer confidence is bouncing back strongly and is currently above pre-COVID-19 lockdown levels. Business confidence has also increased, although below pre-lockdown levels. About 95% of businesses surveyed showed strong optimism, reflecting the improving macroeconomic conditions, stability in the exchange rate, lower input prices, moderation in lending rates, and positive industry prospects. Accordingly, the projected GDP growth rate 2020 reported in July has been revised from 0.9% to 1.9% to reflect these dynamics. As the Bank of Ghana stated, the green shoot of rebound in economic activity are clearly with us. We must be thankful to God for these encouraging developments. This and other assessments provoke a degree of optimism and reveals that the swift, bold, and effective measures implemented by government have been key in quickening the pace of economic recovery. This is the competent leadership we promised under President Akufo-Addo. Indeed, the President's decisive and compassionate leadership in these challenging times have been internationally acknowledged and has added to our reputation as a black star of Africa. Mr. Speaker, I want to reassure the House that despite the setbacks from the pandemic, we are on track to recover.
Well, the Finance Minister had been accused by the NDC of supervising a return of the country to being HIPIC. He took advantage of the 2021 expenditure in advance of appropriation. That's the technical term for what he did today before Parliament to fight back. Well, this is his reaction to all that.
Former President took an economy that was $64 billion in 2013 and shrank it down to $55 billion in 2016. This means that for 4 years in office, that administration managed to achieve an unenviable record of reducing the Ghanaian economy by nearly $10 billion. These, Mr. Speaker, are the facts. Mr. Speaker, in 2001, Ghana had no choice but to swallow her pride and to sign up to the HIPIC initiative, a legacy led by the outgoing NDC government. Thankfully, Mr. Speaker, President J. Kufuor got us to completion point in record time and came out of HIPC. By 2014, barely 2 years in office, President Mahama's homegrown economic policy had failed, and Ghana signed up once again onto an IMF program. The Akufo-Addo government took Ghana out of the IMF program in record time. Ironically, those who mismanage the economy for us to come and fix it are the ones wishing Ghana ill. My message to them is this: there is no turning back. HIPC is behind us. Economic mismanagement is behind us. The economy is stronger today than it was 4 years ago, and will continue to grow stronger and stronger with 4 more years to do more for the people of Ghana with God's help.
Well, he, in fact, today announced that there actually will be some more borrowing, up to $5 billion from the international capital markets.
To support the 2021 budget and liability management, we plan to source funding from the international capital markets. This will comprise the issuance of sovereign bonds of US $3 billion, with the option to increase it to $5 billion should market conditions prove favorable. Out of the amount to be raised, $1.5 billion will be used to support the 2021 budget and $3.5 billion for liability management.
On the telephone line with me right now is Deputy Finance Minister Mr. Kwaku Kwarteng. Mr. Kwarteng, thank you for your time here on Top Story. Hello, Mr. Kwarteng, can you hear me?
Good evening to your listeners.
Great. I mean, today, just shortly after you addressed the Parliament, the Finance Minister did, the minority held a press conference to give their own reaction to some of the key points that the Finance Minister had laid out. Just this is a quick point that they made about what we've heard today, briefly. And I'll get your reaction to this.
He spent the day telling us issues about 2019. You and I are interested in current issues, because that is what will inform it. In 2016, when Honorable Setepe came here, he requested for about 10 billion. Today, Mr. Kenuforiata is requesting for 27 billion. Out of that 27 billion, over 10 billion of that amount would be used to service debt. That is debt servicing. It tells you that this country is broke. When you read the latest October report from the IMF, and I feel that is more credible because this minister hasn't been credible enough. Our debt to GDP is projected at 76% of GDP. When he took over as minister, the debt to GDP was about 56%. And that is the critical element, not just the nominal debt. The nominal debt actually is moved up by over 150 billion. But when you increase your debt, you have to increase the base of your GDP so that it can support that debt. It has moved from 57 and is now hitting almost 80%. When a middle-income country crosses the 70% mark, it means that you are hugely debt distressed. And so we don't need the IMF to come and tell us that Ghana is HIPC. By the minister's own track record, Ghana falls within the category of a HIPC country, and that is a fact. In his budget, the 2020 budget, we are expecting tax revenue of 42 billion, and yet debt servicing alone, when it comes to interest payment and amortization, we are paying 38 billion. What it means is that the whole of Ghana, when the government of Ghana collects our tax revenues, more than 90% of that amount is used to service our debt, even before we pay salaries and other statutory payments. If this country is not broke, if this country is not in the state of comatose, there's no other word that can describe this country. All of us should prepare for difficult times next year, because what the minister is doing, based on the IMF document, is that he's running a deficit of 16%. That is the highest in that report. Even South Africa is not running that deficit. Nigeria is not running that deficit. Everybody is prioritizing and spending on critical areas. But our minister is interested in recurrent expenditure. Ladies and gentlemen, we do know that this minister has run out of ideas. We do know that this government promised so much and yet delivered very little. They promised to do one district, one factory, one village, one dam, 1 million per constituency Today was an opportunity for the minister to itemize to you, the people of Ghana, and account to you what they have achieved so far. What he did was nothing but an abysmal performance. And you, the people of Ghana, you have a responsibility and a duty to ensure that we kick this incompetent government out of office. We can no longer tolerate 4 more years of hardship, 4 more years of deception, 4 more years of borrowing and wanton dissipation of national resources, but above all, 4 more years of satisfying families, friends, and cronies when the ordinary Ghanaian cannot even put just 1 square meal on the table.
Mr. Kwarteng, is the economy broke?
The economy is not broke at all, and we don't have to look far. Look, statistics could be used for anything. But if you want to understand what has happened to Ghana's economy, I know we do not have time. But remember that it was the former President Mahama that told us that the economy was down to the bone. Subsequently, we went to Senchi to develop the homegrown policies. And that was when Madame Ikuadonko and several others went to Senchi to produce this document for us. Whatever we got from that, by 2015, it had become clear that we're not in a position to carry on. We went for an IMF bailout. What this administration has done is to take us out of the IMF program. All the indicators, as I said, the statistics could be used for anything, but you must, if you want to know exactly how the economy has been managed, you need to look at the interface between economic management and what the people get. Namely, what exactly do banks get when they go to the banks to borrow money? If things were mismanaged, you would see that lending rates will be going up. As I speak with you, they are coming down. Inflation coming lower than we inherited it. You know, these are the points at which people can feel the impact of economic management. And all those were better. The statistics that I heard the minority put out today and the narrative that they ran on those statistics could be debunked any day. But in order that we don't get into this battle of statistics, I'm just saying, let us look at what has come out of our economic management strategies. Look.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, we'll get to the other details, but back to the point about being broke or not. You simply have to look at, and most people know this, if you are spending what you don't have, you certainly must be broke. I mean, IMF says debt to GDP ratio 76%. We've crossed that threshold already. We are talking about, tax revenues of 42 billion. You're using 30 billion plus of that to service your debt. The finance minister has announced today that you'll be going to the capital markets to borrow more, up to $5 billion. That clearly shows that what we are doing currently, something has to give. The economy can sustain this level of borrowing when we are not raising enough revenue correspondingly forever.
Yes, but the 5 billion capital market borrowing that the minister referred to, what is it going to be used for? What the minister said was that 3.5 billion of that would be used for liability management. And let me tell you what we mean by that. And the text to Parliament was clear that if conditions on the market become favorable, that is to say, we did inherit some very expensive debt from the previous administration. We ourselves have contracted some debt in recent past, at far better interest rates than we inherited. What the minister is saying, give me this approval, I will look at the capital market. If conditions become favorable, that was what the minister said, we will borrow and use it to retire some of the more expensive debt that we inherited. To interpret that to mean that then the economy is broke is just the wrong point. That is the first point. The second is that even the rise in debt that we have seen you must decode it and find out what has contributed to it. Look, we are not going to have a COVID-19 every year. A large part of the increase that has been discussed is coming from the borrowing made necessary by COVID-19. Globally, the projected debt to GDP ratio is 101.5% of GDP. Ghana is doing 76. Let's even assume that projection to be accurate. So, really, for us to pretend that nothing has happened, there hasn't been any COVID-19, and therefore this is usual business, and therefore the economy is broke. It's again misleading analysis.
Let's do some facts now. How much exactly have we borrowed just for COVID-19 purposes?
I don't have the figures here with me. We can always.
But in what were presented today,
I'm going on to make a second point that it is in addition to COVID-19. Look, things like the financial sector cleanup. We're not going to do that every year. We have the option, as the previous administration did, to pretend that even when DKM was clear, when First Allied was clear, when Aiding Microfinance and all those microfinance, all those financial institutions were collapsing, when we knew that there had to be some response, government could have pretended that we had not seen it and done what the previous administration did. We decided to confront it. That has added to the desktop. What I'm telling you is this. It is not sufficient to say you have increased debt. You have to look at what has led to the increase. Are the items contributing to that increase your usual recurrent expenditure that is likely to continue? Are you going to have COVID-19 every year? Are you going to do financial sector cleanup every year? If you decode it, you'll be left in no doubt that the strategies informing our debt management have been right. And we should, of course, we are in an election year. But on some of these matters, I think we can be candid to the facts and let people tell us if they were confronted with COVID-19, what would have been their response when the borders were closed down, when your revenue was underperforming because businesses had been shut down in order to protect lives and livelihoods. If you were confronted with that, what would have been your alternative? If we can have that kind of discussion, we would realize that indeed this government approach was the best. And the recovery is on course because we're confident that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll interrogate the recovery claims shortly, but let's look at the amount of money that you've spent on COVID. If you look at what was presented today, you put all the figures together, you're talking about something in the range of 10 billion cedis spent on COVID alone, according to the finance minister. We can break it down, implementing the 1.3 billion. COVID-19 emergency preparedness and response plan. Then there's 1.2 billion coronavirus alleviation program. There's a cap, launching of the 2 billion, and on and on and on. Together comes to 10 billion. That is what you've spent on COVID-19. Is that alone the reason why we are 76% to GDP? It can be.
No, but those are the direct expenditures that government had to take on because of COVID. What you should also go further and analyze is the revenue shortfall that came with the COVID-19. How are you going to address it? So you would see that the impact of COVID-19 on the fiscal would be far bigger than the figures you have just read. That's what I'm saying, that it is helpful to decode what was borrowed to fill the gap that COVID-19 left us. Are they part of your analysis? Look, if you take the financial sector cleanup out, you take COVID-19 out, and to some extent you can even take the one-off energy sector expenditures. That is why we are not sleeping in darkness today. If you take these three big items out, you will then realize that this administration has managed our debt far better than we met it. And even though we ourselves consider that yes, COVID-19 and all those unforeseen shocks have hit us, we believe that we have put up the best performance. We think that our projections in terms of debt to GDP, in terms of deficit, compare very favorably with what has happened globally. But we still think that going forward, we need a recovery program to bring us back on track.
Yeah, and the finance minister talks about recovering faster than anticipated. However, there are still some details in what he presented today that poses some challenges. I mean, we have projected the 2021 first 19 quarter total revenue grants up to 13.3 billion, while total expenditure, including the clearance of arrears, is projected to be around 24 billion. The result is a projected fiscal deficit of around 10.7 billion for the period. We are not cutting our cloth according to our size here. That is the point about this economy running into unsustainable debt and leaving us broke by early next year.
No, it wouldn't. You need to look at the fiscal deficit path that we have defined and which the minister indicated today. You see, to start with, but
a simple question: why are we not cutting our cloth according to our size?
Because there's a limit to how much you can cut your expenditure. Look, beyond all that has happened, government still believes that a recovery is possible whilst maintaining some of the commitments we have made to the people by way of free SHS and many of the other social services we want to provide to the people. We're not in a position to say we inherited an IMF economy. However, we provided you with these reliefs and this kind of social support, but because of COVID and because of the need to recover, we are unable to do free SHS. That is not a choice of this administration. Others may well do so. We don't want to do that. We believe that we need to define our fiscal deficit path over the medium term in such a way that we can still accommodate some of the expenditures that bring relief to our people. Ultimately, it is the human resources you are developing that would build this country. And therefore, it's not our choice. Others, as I said, may have the choice to do so. We are not going to cut the fundamental commitments we have made to people. That is the point of economic management. We would manage...
Yeah, but economic management means, and we remember very clearly in this country when President John Kufuor was faced with a similar crisis, of course not a pandemic, but he came into at a time when the oil prices had collapsed worldwide and prices had gone up, rather. I mean, prices had gone up quite significantly. We were in HIPIC, and he introduced the word we have to tighten our belts, make significant cuts. But here we are in 2020 with COVID-19. Again, we have oil prices. Now we have oil-producing country collapsed. Our revenues are not coming in. Even in normal times, we are having challenges with that. And yet you're still saying that you want to keep all your spending commitments.
I'm not saying we are keeping all our spending commitments. I'm saying that there are some fundamental commitments. We would have loved to spend more. But for our recovery program, we probably would have spent more even in the first quarter of 2021. Why are we not doing that? Because we recognize that in view of the commitments we have taken on in the light of COVID, you need to now measure your expenditures. And that is why in his presentation to Parliament, the minister also indicated the fiscal pact in the medium term. It is not that we have just done anything. We know where we want to get to in 3 years, because if you don't manage your fiscal consolidation, then there will be a burden on you to cut some of the basic commitments you have made to the people, no matter what anybody would say to you in economic theory. Trust me, it would be bad economic management, to be bad governance, for anybody to have said some of the fundamental changes we have brought in the lives of the vulnerable will now have to be withdrawn because of COVID.
But it's also true that you have an elections to prosecute and win, and that clearly is influencing part of the decisions and not necessarily the economics. True or false?
Anybody that says that government perhaps would have loved to cancel free SHS, would have loved to cancel support for teacher trainees, nursing trainees, would have loved to cancel all the support we're giving to the people, but for politics, will not be doing an honest assessment of this administration. So when we committed to do some of these things in our manifesto in the 2016 elections and got into office, there were people who advised that you should not be in a hurry to deploy these measures. Wait, maybe the second year, the third year, because you have inherited an economy that is in an IMF bailout. Take your time, recover. The commitment of government to start these interventions anyway should suggest to you that we are thinking beyond the politics.
Well, we'll see. I'm grateful that he joined us. That is Mr. Kuku Kwating, who is the Deputy Finance Minister, of course, talking to us about what the Finance Minister presented to the House today. It's called the 2021 Expenditure in Advance of Appropriation. Remember that, of course, this current government term will expire post the elections, December 7th to be very specific. If they win, they get to present a budget in March. So this is actually what has been presented to allow government to still spend any government who wins, really, to spend the first three up until March before the substantive budget is read. We're going to be speaking to the minority side very shortly on some of the key issues that had been raised today, both by the Finance Minister and the Deputy Finance Minister right now. You want to join me with your thoughts? What are your thoughts also? 055 11 11 997.
Hey, Charlie. My network